Millionaire CEO calls the waitress a liar about speaking 9 languages. 3 words later, he's frozen silent. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. Jack Anderson sat at the sleek, polished table of one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, his eyes scanning through his phone as he waited for his meal. Dressed in an impeccable suit, he looked every bit the billionaire tech mogul that he was. The crystal chandelier overhead reflected in his glasses, and the soft murmur of high-end business deals and hushed conversations filled the air around him. As he tapped away on his phone, his mind was already racing through numbers, strategies, and projections for his next big move. He was always several steps ahead, and everyone knew it. His world was one of power, money, and control. And yet, today, Jack found himself annoyed, waiting for someone to serve him in a restaurant, as if his time wasn't valuable enough. His fingers drummed impatiently on the table. He didn't care much for the service here. They were all just people, right? At least, that's what he told himself. But this was the price of success. As the minutes dragged on, his irritation only grew. This is ridiculous, he muttered under his breath, swiping through yet another set of emails. It wasn't long before the waitress arrived, a young woman in a simple black and white uniform, carrying a silver tray in one hand. Her name was Lily Green, and she had no idea just how much her life was about to change in the next few minutes. When she set down the glass of sparkling water in front of Jack, he barely glanced up. His sharp eyes barely met hers as he muttered, "Thanks." Lily stood still for a moment, waiting for him to acknowledge her presence properly, but he was too engrossed in his world to notice. She knew the drill, of course. She had seen his type before. But today was different. She wasn't just another waitress. She had a story of her own. As she turned to leave, Jack, still distracted, looked up at her and scoffed. "How many languages do you speak, anyway? You probably know only one, right?" Lily didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. Jack had already dismissed her in his mind. His laugh echoed in the space, sharp and dismissive. He thought it was a joke. She, the waitress, speaking multiple languages? It was absurd to him. But Lily's eyes, soft yet sharp, were already calculating her response. A quiet smile tugged at her lips as she said, "Actually, I speak 9 languages." Jack's eyes narrowed in disbelief. 9? You? Sure you do, he scoffed. "Tell me, what's your secret, huh? You're not even educated enough to be making that up. Go ahead. Prove it." He leaned back, confident that he had caught her in a lie. But Lily simply smiled, her calm demeanor never faltering. And then, she spoke. "I can speak Arabic," she said softly, her voice steady. Jack froze, the words hanging in the air between them. He hadn't expected that. Lily's words, so calm and sure, were a stark contrast to the disbelief he felt creeping into his mind. He had mocked her, assumed she was nothing more than a waitress with no real education. But here she was, speaking fluent Arabic without hesitation. Jack's lips parted, but no words came out. He felt a strange chill creep up his spine, the weight of his own arrogance catching up to him. Lily's calm, measured words were enough to silence him in an instant. His confidence shattered. Jack stared at Lily, his mind racing, trying to process what had just happened. He had made a joke at her expense, dismissing her as just another person in a uniform. But now, he was the one who was speechless. His eyes narrowed as he searched her face for any sign of a trick, but there was nothing, just calm, quiet confidence. She wasn't mocking him. She was simply stating a fact. Her voice had been steady, unshaken by his dismissive tone. His grip on the edge of the table tightened, as if he needed something to hold on to. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. He had underestimated her, and now the weight of that realization was settling in. Lily, on the other hand, didn't wait for his response. She turned to walk away, her steps deliberate, measured, as if she hadn't just silenced one of the most powerful men in the room with a few simple words. Jack watched her go, his thoughts a tangled mess. He wanted to be angry, to brush it off as some fluke, but he couldn't. Something about the way she had spoken, The ease with which she had delivered the words caught him off guard. She was no ordinary waitress. He had thought he could control the situation, manipulate the conversation with his wealth and status, but instead, he had been the one who was taken aback. He shook his head, trying to push the thought away, but it lingered, gnawing at him. He couldn't understand why it bothered him so much. She was just a waitress, right? Why was he still thinking about it? He looked down at his phone, attempting to distract himself, but his mind kept drifting back to her. He had dismissed her the moment she walked up to his table, never once considering that she might have more to offer than just a drink order. But now, he couldn't stop replaying her calm words in his head. 9 languages. The thought was almost absurd. He had met people from all walks of life, but how many of them had the kind of knowledge, the kind of intellect, that Lily had shown him in just a few seconds? He had worked so hard to build his empire, to surround himself with people who were as driven and successful as he was. And yet, here was this woman, who, despite her position, had something he didn't even recognize in himself. He felt a flicker of shame, something he wasn't used to feeling. He had been so quick to judge, so quick to write her off as someone less than him, and now he was forced to face the reality that he had been wrong. Very wrong. Jack took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling that was creeping up on him. But it wouldn't go away. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor as he followed her. She was moving gracefully between the tables, efficient and poised, not even looking back at him. He had no idea what he was doing, but something inside him told him he couldn't let this go. He had to know more. He had to understand who she really was. He caught up to her just as she was about to move to another table. "Lily," he said, his voice softer now, almost apologetic. She turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. I didn't mean to offend you earlier," he said, his voice trailing off slightly. For the first time, he felt vulnerable. She raised an eyebrow, her gaze sharp. "It's not about that, Mr. Anderson," she replied coolly. "You didn't offend me. You just underestimated me." Her words hit him harder than any insult ever could. He felt a flush of heat creep up his neck. She was right, of course. He had underestimated her. He had thought of her as nothing more than a waitress, someone beneath him, someone he could ignore. But now, he realized how wrong he had been. He opened his mouth to say something, to make some sort of excuse, but she was already turning away. "If you need anything else," she said, her voice still professional, "I'll be here." Jack stood there for a moment, watching her walk away. He was left standing in the middle of the bustling restaurant, the noise around him fading into the background. For the first time in a long time, he felt something he couldn't name. Respect, maybe, or maybe just the unsettling realization that he wasn't always the smartest person in the room. Jack watched Lily walk away, her movements graceful and unhurried, as if the entire interaction had meant little to her. She was the picture of composure, while he was left with a gnawing feeling he couldn't shake. He stood there, frozen, watching her disappear into the bustling restaurant, the weight of his own arrogance pressing down on him. He had prided himself on his ability to assess people, to see through the facades and get to the truth. But Lily had shattered that illusion in an instant. He had been wrong, and for the first time in years, he didn't know how to deal with it. His mind raced. How could a waitress, someone he had clearly underestimated, be so intelligent, so confident? He had thought he was in control, that he could use his wealth and status to maintain power in any situation, but Lily had proven that wrong. He could feel his ego bristling, wanting to fight back, but there was a part of him that knew this was different. She had shown him something he didn't expect, something he hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. He had to admit it, even if it irked him. He respected her. His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a text from his assistant, David. He quickly read through the message, but his mind wasn't on work anymore. His mind was on Lily. He needed to figure this out, needed to understand what had just happened. He glanced over to the bar, where she was serving drinks, moving with the same quiet efficiency as before. She was already back to work, unaffected by the exchange that had just unfolded. Jack wasn't sure why, but he couldn't let it go. He wasn't used to being the one left wondering. With a deep breath, he stood up and made his way toward the bar. As he approached, Lily looked up, her eyes briefly meeting his before she turned away to grab a glass from the shelf. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what he was even doing. This wasn't like him. He wasn't the kind of man who chased after answers, especially not from someone like her. But today had been different. He cleared his throat, catching her attention. "Lily," he said, his voice steady but carrying a slight edge of curiosity. She turned, meeting his gaze. "Mr. Anderson," she said, her tone still professional, almost as if nothing had changed. He looked at her, unsure of how to proceed. "You mentioned you speak 9 languages," he began, his words tentative, like he was testing the waters. "You weren't kidding, were you?" She gave a small, almost imperceptible smile, but her eyes were unreadable. "No, I wasn't," she replied simply. Jack took a step closer, his gaze never leaving her face. "How did you learn all of that?" he asked, genuinely curious now. Lily paused for a moment, the weight of his question hanging in the air. She set the glass down on the counter, her hands stilling. "Life doesn't always go as planned," she said quietly, her voice soft but firm. "Sometimes you just pick up things along the way." Jack blinked, taken aback by the simplicity of her answer. It wasn't what he had expected. "That's it?" he asked, unable to hide the surprise in his voice. She met his gaze again, her expression guarded. "What else do you want me to say?" she asked, her tone almost challenging. Jack opened his mouth to reply but stopped himself. He had no response. The truth was, he didn't know what to say. He had expected her to offer him some elaborate story, some justification for why she knew so much. But instead, she had given him nothing. Nothing but honesty. And for some reason, that hit him harder than anything else. "I don't know," he said slowly, his voice almost a whisper. I thought I knew everything about people like you." She tilted her head, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. "People like me?" she echoed. "You mean people who wait on others? People who don't matter unless they're serving you something?" Jack's breath caught in his throat. Her words were sharp, cutting through the thin veneer of his confidence. He hadn't expected her to challenge him. And yet, here she was, doing it effortlessly. "I didn't mean it like that," he muttered, feeling a rare flush of discomfort. Lily gave him a measured look, her gaze steady. "No, you didn't," she replied, her voice softening slightly. "But you thought it." Jack stood there for a moment, completely taken aback. He didn't know how to respond. She had him cornered, not with anger or insults, but with the truth. And that was something he wasn't used to dealing with. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Finally, he exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice sincere. It wasn't something he said often, but for some reason, it felt right now. Lily nodded, accepting the apology without hesitation. She didn't need his pity. She didn't need his approval. And she didn't need his apology. But somehow, in that moment, it felt like they were both on the same level for the first time. Jack turned to leave, but before he could walk away, Lily spoke again. "You're not as untouchable as you think, Mr. Anderson," she said quietly. He froze, her words lingering in the air like a challenge. "I'm not sure I ever thought I was," he muttered, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his voice. He turned back to look at her, but she was already moving on to the next table, her focus completely on her work. For a moment, Jack just stood there, watching her, before he finally turned and walked out of the restaurant, the weight of the evening settling heavily on his shoulders. Jack could hardly concentrate the next few days. Work was piling up, meetings needed his attention, but his mind kept drifting back to that moment with Lily. He had never been the type to dwell on something so trivial, but something about her had gotten under his skin. It wasn't just that she spoke 9 languages or that she had caught him off guard. It was the way she had made him feel, like he wasn't the smartest person in the room, which, for Jack Anderson, was a rare experience. He found himself looking for excuses to return to the restaurant, to see her again. It wasn't just curiosity. It was something more, something he wasn't ready to admit. Every day, he walked past the restaurant, his gaze instinctively drifting toward the windows, as if hoping to catch a glimpse of her. But he couldn't bring himself to go inside. What would he say? Would he apologize again? No, that would be too easy, too predictable. Jack was used to controlling situations, but this simple encounter with a waitress, had completely disarmed him. He had never felt this way before. On the 4th day, he found himself standing outside the restaurant again. He stared at the entrance for a moment, unsure of his next move. He had no plan. He wasn't even sure why he was there. All he knew was that he couldn't leave it like this. He took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The familiar chime of the bell above the door sounded, and the soft hum of conversation filled the air. Jack scanned the room, his eyes quickly searching for her. And there she was, behind the bar, pouring drinks with her usual ease. She hadn't noticed him yet, and Jack found himself hesitating for a moment. He stood there, unsure of what to do next, before taking a step toward her. Lily looked up, her eyes briefly meeting his, before she turned away again, as if dismissing him entirely. Jack couldn't decide if it was a relief or a blow to his ego. He walked up to the bar and cleared his throat, causing her to look up again. "Lily," he said, his voice slightly uncertain. "Mr. Anderson," she replied, her tone still polite but distant. There it was again, the distance. The wall she had built up between them. He hated it. "I've been thinking," Jack began, choosing his words carefully, "about what happened the other day." Lily didn't respond right away, but her expression softened ever so slightly. "You don't have to apologize," she said, her voice quiet, almost as if she didn't want anyone else to hear. Jack paused. "I wasn't apologizing," he said slowly. He stopped himself. What was he even trying to say? This wasn't like him. He was usually confident, direct. But with her, everything was different. "I wanted to know more," he said finally. "About you. About why you know so many languages. You're clearly not just a waitress." Lily regarded him for a long moment, her gaze steady. "Why does it matter to you?" she asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Jack opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. Why did it matter to him? He hadn't asked himself that before. It wasn't just about her intelligence or her ability to speak 9 languages. It was something else. Something that had shaken him in a way he couldn't explain. "Because I don't meet many people who can do what you do," Jack said, his voice lower now, more sincere than it had been before. "And I guess I've spent so long believing I have everything figured out, but I'm starting to realize I don't." Lily didn't say anything at first. She just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she nodded slightly. "I get it," she said softly. "But that doesn't mean you can always understand everything just by looking at it." Jack felt a sharp pang of realization. She was right. He had always prided himself on being able to read people, to see through them, to understand their motivations. But with Lily, he had failed miserably. And it wasn't because she was hiding something. It was because he had been too blinded by his own assumptions to truly see her. "I'm not asking for anything," Lily continued, her voice steady. "I just wanted to be left alone to do my job." Jack nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. He had pushed her, assumed too much, and now he was finally understanding the boundaries he had crossed. He took a step back, his eyes still locked on hers. "I'm sorry," he said again, this time meaning it more than he had the first time. "I don't expect anything from you, but I won't make that mistake again." Lily gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile, the first real one he had seen from her. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now. For a moment, Jack just stood there, watching her. He wasn't sure what this moment meant for either of them, but he knew one thing for certain. He was never going to forget it. He turned to leave, but as he reached the door, he looked back one last time. Lily was already back to her work, serving the next customer with the same calm, efficient grace. But something had changed. For the first time, Jack felt like he was seeing her clearly. Jack hadn't returned to the restaurant in the days following their conversation, but he couldn't stop thinking about Lily. The way she had looked at him, unimpressed, calm, steady, was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Most people in his world bowed to him, eager to please, desperate to be near the power he held. But Lily wasn't like that. She wasn't impressed by his wealth, his status, or his title. It left him unsettled, and it intrigued him. He had learned more in a few minutes with her than he had from years of meetings with people who only wanted something from him. He had no idea what it was about her that affected him so much. Maybe it was her intellect, or maybe it was the fact that she made him question the life he had built. He was used to being the smartest person in the room, but with her, he felt like he was suddenly out of his depth. Jack had never been afraid to admit his faults, but for some reason, he wasn't ready to face the discomfort he felt after meeting Lily. He wanted to understand her, to figure out what made her tick, but he also didn't want to admit that he was feeling something he couldn't control. The next day, he found himself heading toward the restaurant again, his footsteps hesitant but determined. He hadn't planned it, but something was pulling him back. When he walked through the door, the familiar chime of the bell above it sounded, and the quiet hum of conversation filled his ears. His eyes immediately searched for her, and there she was, moving with ease between tables. He could see the way she smiled at the customers, her movements fluid, professional. But there was something else there, a quiet strength that no one else seemed to notice. Jack stood still for a moment, watching her. She hadn't noticed him yet. He took a breath and walked up to the bar. Lily looked up as he approached, and this time, her expression was different. There was no distance in her eyes, no wall. Instead, there was just curiosity. "Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice as calm as ever. "What can I get for you today?" Jack hesitated, unsure of how to start the conversation. He had come here for a reason, but now that he was standing in front of her, he wasn't sure what to say. I just wanted to talk," he said finally, his voice more uncertain than he intended. Lily nodded slightly, setting down the drink she was preparing. "All right," she said, her tone still professional, but now tinged with something else. Maybe it was understanding, or maybe it was just patience. "What about?" Jack leaned against the counter, looking at her carefully. "I don't know," he admitted. "You've got me thinking about a lot of things. About my life, my choices. I guess I came here to try and figure out why." She looked at him for a long moment, her gaze searching, as if weighing his words. "It's not my job to make you figure things out," she said softly. "I'm just here to do mine." Jack felt a pang of guilt, a twinge of realization. She was right. She wasn't responsible for his reflections or his problems. She was just living her life, doing her job, and he had interrupted that. But there was something about her that made him want to keep talking, keep unraveling the layers of this mystery that was her. "I know," he said, his voice quieter now. "But you made me see something I didn't expect. I thought I had it all figured out, but maybe I don't." Lily didn't respond right away. She just watched him, her expression unreadable. Then, after a moment, she spoke. "No one really does," she said, her voice low but steady. "We just keep going, one step at a time. No one has all the answers, Mr. Anderson. Not even you." Jack felt a strange relief in her words. It wasn't the answer he had been looking for, but it was the truth. And sometimes, the truth was more powerful than anything else. "You're right," he said, finally feeling the tension leave his body. "I think I've been chasing something that doesn't exist." Lily gave him a small, knowing smile. "That's usually the way it goes." Jack smiled back, feeling a shift inside of him. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't pretending. He wasn't trying to be someone he wasn't. He was just Jack. And that was enough. For a moment, there was silence between them. Then Jack stood up straight, straightening his jacket. "I'll leave you to it," he said, his voice back to its usual calm. "But thank you, Lily, for everything." She nodded, her smile still there, though it was quieter now. "Take care, Mr. Anderson." Jack turned to leave, but before he reached the door, he glanced back. She was already moving on to her next table, handling everything with ease. But something had changed. Jack didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a while, he felt like he might be able to face it without all the answers. Just one step at a time. Days passed, and Jack found himself returning to the restaurant more frequently. It wasn't something he had planned, but he couldn't seem to shake the feeling that something was drawing him back. He still had work to do, deals to close, but all of it felt insignificant compared to the pull he felt whenever he thought about Lily. Every time he walked through the door of the restaurant, he felt a strange mix of anticipation and hesitation. He wasn't sure what he was hoping for. Maybe another conversation, maybe another glimpse of that calm, confident woman who had managed to shift his perspective in ways he couldn't fully understand. He had never considered himself someone who needed to change. He had built his empire on the belief that control was everything, that he had to be the smartest, the most capable. But Lily had made him question that belief. She hadn't asked for anything from him. She hadn't tried to impress him or gain his approval. She simply existed, doing her job with an effortless grace that had both intrigued and unsettled him. It was a Friday afternoon when Jack found himself walking into the restaurant once again. The familiar chime of the doorbell greeted him, and the low hum of conversation filled the air. He took a deep breath and scanned the room, his eyes instinctively searching for her. And there she was, behind the bar, pouring a drink with the same efficiency he had come to expect from her. She didn't notice him right away, and Jack found himself standing still for a moment, watching her. There was something about the way she moved, the way she interacted with the customers, that made her stand out in a way no one else did. He walked over to the bar, and this time, she looked up as he approached. Her expression was calm, as always, but there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Mr. Anderson," she said with a polite nod. "What can I get you today?" Jack felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. He had come here with the intention of speaking to her, but now that he was standing in front of her, he wasn't sure what to say. He had never been good at admitting he didn't have the answers, but for some reason, with Lily, he felt like it was okay. "I was hoping to talk," he said, his voice steady but carrying an underlying hint of uncertainty. She raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Talk?" she echoed. "About what?" Jack hesitated for a moment before speaking. About you. I don't know why, but I can't stop thinking about our last conversation. You said something that stuck with me." Lily regarded him quietly, her expression unreadable. She didn't rush to respond, allowing the silence to stretch between them. Jack had expected her to dismiss him, to brush him off like she had done before, but she didn't. Instead, she just waited, giving him the space to continue. "You said no one really has it all figured out," Jack said finally, his voice softer now. "And I think you were right. I've spent so much time trying to control everything, trying to make sure I have all the answers. But I've realized that maybe I don't." Lily didn't say anything for a long moment. She just looked at him, her gaze steady and contemplative. Finally, she spoke. "It's not about having all the answers," she said quietly. "It's about being okay with not knowing. Not everything is in your control, and that's okay." Jack felt a weight lift off his shoulders as her words settled over him. It wasn't the solution he had been searching for, but it was the understanding he needed. "You're right," he said, his voice filled with a quiet realization. "I've spent so long thinking that I needed to have all the answers, but maybe it's enough to just be okay with not knowing." Lily gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Sometimes that's the hardest part," she said. Jack stood there for a moment, looking at her, trying to find the words to express what he was feeling. He had come here hoping for something. Maybe an answer, maybe just a sense of closure, but what he had found instead was something much more profound. He had found a sense of peace. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice quiet but sincere, "for reminding me of that." Lily nodded, her smile softening. "No problem, Mr. Anderson," she said, her tone light and casual. "It's just my job." Jack watched her for a moment longer before turning to leave. As he walked out of the restaurant, he felt a sense of clarity that he hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't have all the answers, and maybe he never would. But for the first time in years, he was okay with that. He didn't need to control everything. He didn't need to have all the answers. Sometimes, it was enough just to take things one step at a time. The days that followed were strangely peaceful for Jack. He had expected to feel a sense of relief, but instead, it was more of a quiet understanding. After his conversation with Lily, something had shifted within him. He no longer felt the constant pressure to be in control, to know everything, or to manipulate situations to his advantage. It was liberating in a way he hadn't anticipated. Work was still demanding, of course. There were always meetings, phone calls, and deadlines. But Jack found himself more focused than ever. He wasn't rushing through tasks just to get them done. Instead, he was taking his time, thinking things through, and not feeling guilty about the moments he took to breathe. Despite all the changes, Jack hadn't returned to the restaurant. He wasn't sure why, but something inside him told him it wasn't the right time. Maybe he still wasn't ready to face Lily again, or maybe he was waiting for something more to unfold, something he couldn't yet see. It wasn't until the following Friday that he found himself standing outside the restaurant again. The weather had turned colder, the city streets a little more hectic as winter crept in, but Jack's steps felt lighter than before. He stood at the entrance for a moment, his hand hovering over the door. He had been here so many times before, but this time was different. He wasn't here for business, or to impress anyone, or to hide behind his wealth and status. He was here because something inside him felt like it was time. Time to face whatever was left unresolved. As the door opened with a soft chime, Jack walked inside. The familiar sounds of clinking dishes and quiet conversations filled the air, but his focus remained on one thing: finding Lily. She wasn't behind the bar this time. Instead, he saw her at a table, chatting with a group of customers. Jack took a seat at the bar, trying not to draw attention to himself. He wasn't sure how to approach her, whether to wait for her to come to him or whether to make the first move. It felt strange, sitting there, unsure of what to do next. A few minutes passed before Lily walked over, her steps confident but not hurried. Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment, Jack felt that familiar nervous energy that had become so foreign to him in recent days. "Mr. Anderson," she said with a polite nod, her tone casual, as if nothing had changed. Jack smiled, a small, genuine smile. "Lily," he replied, his voice calm. "I wasn't sure if you'd be here tonight." She raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "I work here, remember?" she said lightly. But there was something else in her voice, something that made Jack pause. It wasn't the usual friendly banter. There was a shift in the air, something unspoken between them. Jack cleared his throat, suddenly unsure of his words. "I've been meaning to come back and talk to you." He stopped himself, unsure of how to finish the sentence. He hadn't really thought this through. It wasn't like him to be uncertain. But there was something different about this situation. "You don't have to explain," Lily interrupted, her tone still calm, but now with a hint of understanding. "You're here, and that's enough." Jack studied her for a moment, feeling both relief and a strange tension. She was right. He didn't need to explain. He didn't need to say anything at all. The fact that he had come here, in this moment, was enough. He wasn't sure what he expected from her, but it wasn't this sense of ease, of calm that she seemed to radiate. Jack found himself wanting more of it. "I appreciate that," he said quietly, his voice soft. "You know, I didn't expect any of this." "None of us do," she replied with a small smile. "Life's full of surprises. Sometimes, it's the things we don't plan for that end up being the most important." Jack nodded, her words sinking in deeper than he had anticipated. It wasn't about what he had planned, or what he thought he was supposed to be doing. It was about something simpler, something more honest. And for the first time, Jack wasn't afraid of that. "Maybe I've been focusing too much on the wrong things," Jack said, more to himself than to her. "I think we all do," Lily responded softly. "But it's never too late to start paying attention to what really matters." Jack felt a shift in his chest, a lightness he hadn't known was possible. He wasn't sure what had changed, but it didn't matter. He had come here looking for answers, but instead, he had found something much more profound. Something he didn't need to search for. Something that was already there. "Thank you, Lily," Jack said, his voice sincere, "for helping me see that." Lily gave him a small, knowing smile. "No problem," she replied simply. "Take care, Mr. Anderson." As Jack watched her walk away, he felt a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe he didn't need all the answers. Maybe the most important thing was just being present. And with that thought, Jack realized that he didn't need to control everything. He didn't need to know everything. Sometimes, just being in the moment was enough. Jack's visits to the restaurant became less frequent, but his thoughts were still occupied by Lily. It wasn't that he couldn't focus on work. In fact, he was more productive than ever. But there was an undeniable shift inside him, a change that lingered in the quiet moments when his mind wandered. The way Lily had looked at him, so steady and unflinching, had left an impression. She had no interest in his wealth, no desire to impress him. She was simply herself, and for the first time in a long while, Jack found that quality both unsettling and comforting. One evening, nearly a month after their last conversation, Jack found himself walking back into the restaurant. The air had grown cooler, and the city was starting to feel like a different place, the holiday season just around the corner. He walked through the door, the familiar chime of the bell sounding above him, and immediately, he felt a sense of calm that he hadn't anticipated. This time, he wasn't searching for answers. He wasn't looking to impress anyone or to prove a point. He simply wanted to be there. He glanced around, hoping to see Lily. It wasn't until he approached the bar that he spotted her, chatting with a regular customer, her posture relaxed, her smile warm. Jack took a seat at the bar and waited, unsure of what to say when she approached. It had been a while since they had spoken, and he wasn't sure how she would react to seeing him again. He wasn't sure what he was expecting. It wasn't long before Lily looked up, noticing him sitting there. Her eyes flickered with recognition, but this time, there was no distance in her expression, no polite indifference. Just a simple acknowledgement. "Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice calm, but there was a warmth to it this time. Jack smiled, a small but genuine gesture. "Lily," he replied, his voice easy. "I didn't think I'd be seeing you again so soon." She raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "I work here," she said with a shrug. "It's not like you can avoid me forever." Jack laughed. The tension he hadn't realized he was holding in his shoulders melting away. Fair point, he said. For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other, neither of them rushing to speak. It was as if, in the span of a few weeks, they had both arrived at a place where words weren't necessary. How have you been? Jack asked, breaking the silence. Lily nodded, her smile never faltering. Same as always. Busy. How about you? Jack paused, considering the question. You know, I think I'm starting to figure things out, he said, his voice quieter than before. Lily looked at him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Figuring things out, she echoed. That's good. It's about time. Jack nodded, appreciating the simplicity of her words. It wasn't a challenge or an expectation. It was just a statement of fact, something he needed to hear. I've been trying to stop rushing through life, he continued. Just taking things one step at a time. I know it's not easy, but it feels better this way. Lily studied him for a moment before speaking again. It's not easy for anyone, she said softly. But it's better when you stop pretending you have all the answers. Jack smiled, the tension he had been carrying for so long finally easing. Yeah, he agreed. It really is. There was a comfortable silence between them now, a quiet understanding that neither of them needed to fill. Jack didn't feel the need to explain himself further, and Lily didn't press him to do so. It was enough, just to be in this moment, to have this quiet connection with someone who wasn't impressed by his wealth or his title. He had always prided himself on being in control, on having the answers. But with Lily, he had come to understand that it wasn't about control. It wasn't about being the smartest person in the room. It was about being real. Thank you, Jack said quietly, his voice sincere, for helping me see that. Lily's smile softened, and for the first time, Jack saw the kindness in her eyes that he had missed before. No problem, she replied. It's just what people do for each other, right? Jack nodded, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. He had come here hoping for something. Answers, perhaps, or some sort of closure. But what he had found was something more valuable, a sense of peace. He didn't have all the answers, and that was okay. For the first time, Jack was content with the uncertainty. He stood up from the bar, ready to leave, but before he could walk away, Lily spoke again. You know, you don't have to keep coming back here to talk to me, she said, her tone light. I'm not going anywhere. Jack chuckled softly. I know, but I think I'll be around anyway. Lily watched him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a small smile, she nodded. I'll see you around, Mr. Anderson. Jack smiled back, feeling the weight of the conversation lift from his shoulders. See you, Lily. As he walked out of the restaurant, the cool air hit him, but for the first time in weeks, he didn't mind. The world felt lighter, the future uncertain, but somehow full of possibility. He wasn't in control, and that was okay. Sometimes, not knowing the answers was the best part of all. Weeks had passed since Jack's last visit to the restaurant, and life had slowly returned to its regular rhythm. Jack found himself more relaxed, more focused at work, and oddly content in a way that had eluded him for years. He no longer felt the constant pressure to control every situation. He still had goals, still pursued success, but it was as if he had finally discovered that success wasn't just about achievements or power. It was about balance, about understanding the things that truly mattered. The holidays were approaching, and the city was lit up with festive decorations. Jack was walking home from the office one evening when, as if by some invisible force, his steps took him back toward the restaurant. He hadn't planned it, but he found himself standing in front of the familiar door. He hesitated, wondering if he should go in. After all, he hadn't seen Lily since that last conversation. Was it strange to return? Maybe. But then again, maybe it was just a sign that he had come full circle. He pushed open the door, and the soft chime echoed through the room, instantly pulling him into the comfortable chaos of the restaurant. The warmth of the lights and the chatter of the patrons filled his senses. He glanced around, searching for the familiar face, and there she was. Lily. She was standing by the bar, talking to a customer, and she hadn't seen him yet. Jack stood still for a moment, watching her. She was as graceful as ever, her posture confident, and her smile genuine. He felt a strange sense of peace just by being in the same room with her. There was no anxiety, no pressure. He wasn't here to make a deal, to impress anyone, or to prove anything. He was here because, in this moment, it felt right. It felt like the next step in whatever journey he had started when he first walked into this place. As if sensing his presence, Lily looked up and saw him. Their eyes met, and Jack was surprised by the warmth in her gaze. It wasn't distant or guarded. It was welcoming. She gave him a small nod, acknowledging his presence, and then walked over. "Mr. Anderson," she said with a calm smile. "Back again." Jack smiled in return. "I didn't expect to be," he admitted. "But here I am." There was a moment of silence between them, and Jack couldn't help but feel that they were standing on some kind of threshold. He didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, he didn't feel the need to know. "What can I get you?" Lily asked, breaking the silence. Jack thought for a moment, then shrugged. "Nothing for now," he said. "I just wanted to see how you're doing." Lily raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "I'm fine," she said simply. "How about you? How have you been?" Jack hesitated, then smiled. "Better," he said, the word feeling more genuine than he had anticipated. "I think I'm finally starting to understand what it means to take things one step at a time." Lily's smile softened. "That's good to hear." Jack looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in a long while. She was still the same, calm, steady, grounded, but there was something different about the way he saw her now. She wasn't just a waitress, and she wasn't just someone who had changed his perspective. She was someone who had become part of his journey, someone who had helped him realize that life wasn't about perfection or control. It was about embracing the unknown, and sometimes trusting that things would fall into place. "You were right, Jack said quietly, "about not needing all the answers. I spent so much of my life thinking I had to have everything figured out, but it doesn't work that way." Lily didn't say anything at first. She simply listened, her expression thoughtful. "Life rarely works the way we think it will," she said finally, her voice soft. "But that's what makes it interesting." Jack nodded, feeling a sense of clarity wash over him. He didn't have all the answers, and maybe he never would. But that was okay. He had stopped chasing perfection, stopped trying to control every outcome. And for the first time, he was comfortable with that. The moment stretched on, and Jack realized that he wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't trying to get somewhere or make something happen. He was simply present, and that was enough. After a few moments, Jack stood up, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "I should get going," he said, looking at Lily one last time. She nodded, a small, knowing smile on her face. "Take care, Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice warm but still professional. "You too, Lily," Jack replied, turning to leave. As he stepped outside, the cold air hit his face, but it didn't feel harsh. It felt refreshing, invigorating. The city, with all its noise and busyness, suddenly felt quieter. Jack had taken the first step toward something new, something he couldn't fully define yet, but he was no longer afraid of it. And for the first time, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be.